Welcome to Context Bites. Here you'll find lots of ideas that you can use for your AO3 links for English literature. Welcome back to our Romeo and Juliet series. In today's video, we will be looking at the theme of toxic masculinity and explore Shakespeare's portrayal of male behaviour and attitudes. So let's begin by looking at what underpins these behaviours and attitudes, namely the patriarchy. The patriarchy is a male-dominated system, and within this system men controlled all aspects of society, including politics, business, and especially family life. And like women, men had to project a certain image, one of power and authority. Because if you weren't a man, then what were you? And during Elizabethan times, men had to prove their masculinity, and this was often achieved through aggression and violence. And so the patriarchy should really be seen as a system of control and a driving force for men to act in a particular way in order to protect their honour and dignity. And we see these ideas play out in the prologue. We are told about an ancient grudge between the Capulets and Montagues, yet no one seems to know what this grudge is about, nor does Shakespeare ever explain it. So why do the Capulets and Montagues continue to fight? Could it be that this grudge, this feud, is being used as an excuse to continue a cycle of violence? Because as we know, through aggression and violence, you were able to prove your masculinity. And so by fighting, the men are living up to the image of what it means to be a man, an idea perpetuated by the patriarchy. And we see this in the opening act of the play, when the Capulet servants, Samson and Gregory, antagonize the Montagues. Samson bites his thumb, which would have been considered a great insult during Elizabethan times. In provoking a fight, Samson aims to prove his masculinity, as well as maintain the Capulets' family honour. And throughout the play, Samson and the other male characters display something called hegemonic masculinity. This is the idea that male dominance can be achieved through aggression and violence, or through the domination and submission of women. And Tybalt is a prime example of using aggression and violence to prove your masculinity. From the very beginning of the play, he is openly hostile towards the Montagues in both his actions and his words. In Act 1, when Benvolio tries to reason with Tybalt to end their encounter peacefully, he immediately lashes out, stating, "Peace, I hate the word." By using aggressive language, he aims to show his dominance and macho status. And by portraying Tybalt in this way, Shakespeare is exaggerating the stereotypical male behaviour of the time. Later, Tybalt calls Benvolio a coward, thereby questioning Benvolio's masculinity and provoking him into a fight. We see him do the same with Romeo in Act 3. He calls Romeo a boy, thereby portraying Romeo as weak and something other than masculine. Remember, Tybalt felt insulted by Romeo attending the Capulet ball. He therefore feels he has to regain a lost sense of masculinity and pride, and the only way he can achieve this is by fighting with Romeo, which ultimately leads to his death. In comparison, Mercutio's male dominance is shown through his highly sexualized language. Like most men of the time period, he views women as objects, and for him, love is only considered manly if it is sexualized. In this first quote, his use of phallic imagery with the word prick shows that he views love simply as a physical act. Later, when he describes Rosaline's appearance, you will notice that he simply focuses on her physical features rather than something more meaningful. So is there a way that our male characters could ever break the cycle of toxic masculinity? Potentially, and Shakespeare presents this idea through Romeo. He deliberately juxtaposes Romeo with the other male characters. He's much more sensitive compared to Tybalt, for example, and is often characterized as a Petrarchan lover. And Petrarchan lovers were seen as having lots of inner turmoil, and Romeo certainly seems to fit this profile. In Act 1, we see him pine over Rosaline. His love for her is unrequited, meaning she doesn't feel the same way about him, which leads him to become depressed. Even his father comments on having seen him cry. And for the male audience, his actions would have been seen as a departure from the stereotypical male behaviour of the time. When it comes to the feud, Romeo seems to avoid conflict. He even comments to Benvolio, "Tell me not, for I've heard it all before." And so what makes Romeo different is that he doesn't aim to prove his masculinity through aggression and violence. Rather, he aims to prove it through his love and devotion to Juliet. And this is how Shakespeare sets him apart from the other male characters. So let's consider if Romeo is really all that different. Not really, and Romeo does himself no favours when talking about Rosaline in Act 1. He states, "Nor ope her lap to saints juicing gold," implying that Rosaline would not sleep with him even if offered money. His sexualized language mimics Mercutio's and leads the audience to believe that Romeo, like Mercutio, objectifies women. Later, in his second encounter with Juliet, Romeo exclaims, "Wilt thou leave me so unsatisfied?" implying that he wanted more from Juliet than just to talk. You could argue that in this moment, Romeo is living up to the male stereotype of the time. Finally, in Act 3, Romeo gives in to violence and aggression following Mercutio's death. Perhaps in this moment, Romeo feels a sense of shame in having let his best friend fight in his place and end up dead as a result. Romeo even states, "Juliet, thy beauty has made me effeminate," believing that his love for her has taken away his masculinity. In order to regain it, he must seek revenge, and he does so by killing Tybalt. So let's consider Shakespeare's message to the audience. Given that 4 of the male characters end up dead, Romeo, Tybalt, Mercutio, and Paris, perhaps Shakespeare is criticizing the patriarchy and the control it has over how men behave. Maybe Shakespeare is warning his male audience in particular not to let aggression and violence become their identity. As a final thought, think about Benvolio. He is the only male character from the younger generation to survive. Why? How do his actions and his words compare to the others? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave your ideas in the comment section down below. Don't forget to check out the next video in our series.